Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for episode 14 of Ask the Howlers, a cybersecurity expert roundtable. As far as today's agenda, we will be rolling through the latest security and threat news. This week, we are focusing on counter incident response. And we will be discussing a couple articles that just came to mind with this topic. And it is our Halloween themed edition. So we'll try to add in some spooky vocabulary as we're talking. And then we'll round out with a bonus question. So I am going to do some quick intros. My name is Stacia Tympanick. I am a solutions engineer here at VMware Carbon Black. Trent, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, I'm Trent Greenwood, a senior sales engineering manager here at Carbon Black.
Hey, everyone. I'm Greg Foss, a senior security strategist here at VMware Carbon Black.
Awesome. Guys, thank you for joining us this week. So we're going to kick it off first with Greg. Greg, the first article that you brought is from securityweek.com titled Ransomware Disables Georgia County Election Database. So let's start out. Tell us a little bit about the article. Why did you bring it to the panel today?
Yeah, I think this one is especially interesting because there's been so much focus on elections and election security in general. And, it's one of these that actually touches on something tangible I think we can point to that relates back to the actual risk that some of these systems are under right now. A lot of the attacks we've seen against the election infrastructure and things of that nature haven't really been attacks in the sense of like a cyber attack, really, right? A lot of it's mostly been kind of leading up to these elections in the form of propaganda, disinformation, all of that kind of thing. But this one I found real interesting just because it really is something that is an actual technical attack that impacted election infrastructure directly. As a means of making it more difficult for these systems to function, more difficult for people to vote. And what I found most interesting was actually a quote at the bottom of this, based on a larger body of research that the group behind this initial research had mentioned. I believe is Brett Cowlow of, MCSoft. So they mentioned that at least 82 government bodies in the US have been hit by ransomware so far this year. 18 of those incidents have occurred since the beginning of September. So I mean, that's a pretty significant number. That's something that I was actually shocked to see because it hasn't been really covered that widely in the news. So definitely interested in everyone's thoughts around just kind of this topic in general.
Yeah, I feel like ransomware has kind of become like, if you're still bringing up ransomware, are you cool anymore? Let's move on. But it's still just like anything else, even though it's not sexy, it's something that is super imperative that we be aware of and be able to protect against. So I feel like people just don't want to talk about ransomware anymore. Even though a lot of the campaigns that we see, they might be delivered differently or they might gain access to your infrastructure differently. At the end of the day, we tend to find the destructive nature ends in ransomware. So it's just kind of ironic to me. That seems like a trend. Trent, curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, to me, the interesting thing is it goes back to the fact that this is a business, right? And one of the things that they look at is what's the easiest way for us to make money? So we're going to go after low-hanging fruit. So you've seen this in a lot of the ransomware attacks where what are they targeting, right? They're targeting organizations where you have to have the information. When you target a government entity, they've got to pay that ransomware. They don't really have much of a choice. I mean, here's a perfect example. I mean, they locked up the election database. I mean, what are they going to do? Just say, oh, okay, well, we're not going to pay it. They cannot not pay this. And I think that is really the interesting thing, is not so much that it's still kind of around, but what is it being used for? And who are the real targets, and what sort of information do they really have? And what you're seeing is they're going after low-hanging fruit. You look at educational institutions that get hit like this, school districts, K through 12, where again, they've got to pay it because you've got kids that have to go to college. They need their transcripts. They need that record of their what their grades have been. So they're smart about it. This isn't just some random, we're going to randomly send this stuff out. Very targeted, very well thought out. And even in one of the articles I think we'll be discussing soon, they're actually doing financial recon on the organizations so they understand not only, okay, this is the information that they're dealing with, but this is the potential payout that we're getting.
And one thing I can't help but ask is, one of the things that I saw that was compromised was like the idea of, the signature database, which basically validates that the signature you sign your ballot with is one that matches something that they have on record, which to me just seems so archaic, right? And it's like, when are we going to use a different factor to authenticate voters? It's just something that to me, I feel like we're seeing that it's themed in Black Hat and RSA, and that there seems to be like there are future options. It's a matter of, will we ever start moving in that direction? I'm just curious what your guys' thoughts are. I mean, I just think it's crazy that we're validating signatures like we used to validate credit card receipts.
So I voted, right? I went and I voted in person. Signed. I signed one thing, and then on paper, right, with a pen, and then I had to do it on this digital pad with my finger, and those signatures were like nowhere really close. And in my mind, the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, if somebody were to take and compare these, they'd be like, oh, that wasn't this person, right? That was somebody that did it. And had I sat there and tried to do it, I probably could have done it 10 times and never gotten it just the same way as I did with a written signature. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that a signature is just so old school, it's not even funny.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, like, I'm one of those people that my handwriting is awful 100% of the time, and like I can never sign my name the same ever, like twice. It's ridiculous, and the fact that this is chosen as any form of verifying anything is absolutely ridiculous to me, honestly. And it's funny, that you mentioned this, because the last election during the midterms, my ballot, I did the mail-in ballot. Colorado, we've had this for over a decade now, so it's just kind of how we've been doing it. But I actually had mine sent back because my signature did not match what they have on record. My signature on my identity is, because I signed it on like a touchpad thing, and I can't write well anyway. I mean, that's why I work in computers. But I had to actually photocopy my ID and manually hand deliver this back to them for my ballot to be accepted. Somehow this year it made it in, which is good, but it's still an archaic and ridiculous means of verifying anything. I completely agree.
It's good Halloween costume inspiration if you were a mail-in ballot. Just saying, for anyone that's still trying to put something together last minute, it might not be the worst thing.
Just don't dress up as a Dropbox. Someone might try and steal you.
Perfect couple costume. Oh, incredible.
That could turn out badly. Someone could say fire like they do in Boston.
This is true.
Yeah, we're out of control up here. All right. So let's look at the second article that you brought, Greg, which is a little, I wonder if they get cashmere from Led Zeppelin, what inspires them, but the botnet that targets content management systems comes from bankinfosecurity.com. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with this.
Yeah, this one was super cool to me because it's a new take on a lot of just kind of these malware like spreading techniques that we've observed over time. And what I really like about the article here is they dive into the actual operations of the criminal ecosystem behind it. Essentially something that's now kind of being termed as crime ops. And what this unveils is the larger ecosystem that's at play with a lot of these criminal organizations, how they're actually leveraging a lot more modular techniques and compensating malware to perform some of these attacks, which is super interesting. Like this one is amazing, the complexity that went into the attack in and of itself. They're targeting mainly very popular web content management systems such as WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, all of those ones that you're going to see all over the internet. And they're taking just well-known exploits that have been vetted and weaponized and targeting these applications. And what's interesting is just kind of the frameworks they're using to do so. They're pulling data from different compromised assets to load the implants themselves, taking the actual additional exploits and whatnot from there. Then they're also loading the spreader capabilities from different components of different compromised assets. And it's kind of this chained approach where they're slowly edging in, they get the initial exploit, then they slowly drop in new modular, more capabilities, so to speak, from there, which allow them to take this existing platforms and attack additional web applications. And the group behind this research, they actually stood up a CMS and allowed it to be attacked in order to understand kind of more of this full operation. They did stop it from attacking other constituents and other sites, which is good, but just shows kind of the advancement and the work that's going into a lot of these pieces of malware. And how that's leading into just kind of making it really easy for other folks to go and say purchase this malware, join this botnet, and begin to drop your own malware as these sites are being compromised.
I thought one of the interesting things was it said that they use cloud services like GitHub, Dropbox, Pastebin to hide infrastructure from security tools. And I'm curious, as we're starting to see a couple of vendors come into the attack surface management space, like how is this going to impact them from trying to find those kind of exposed assets or exposed infrastructure if they're already getting a little bit ahead of the 8 ball there?
Right. And it's, using those legitimate tools, legitimate means of communication to do so. All of that is built to bypass security controls, make this activity appear innocuous until it's too late, until the site's completely been taken over. And at that point, I mean, they can have code injected throughout the site and it's very hard to clean up. So it's definitely an interesting one, looking at the Pastebin one specifically. Now Pastebin has added the ability to add password protected pastes. So I mean, that is going to make it all the more easy for these folks to operate using that infrastructure, but also hide their actual code that's hosted on these platforms.
Yeah, lock it down, right?
Right.
All right, awesome. Well, let's move on to Trent, your article that you brought in, which is from threatpost.com, which talks about ransomware as a service companies making donations to charity, about 20K in donations. So, what? Let's say you're on the other side of this. It's always funny. I always tell people, like, you hate trust fund kids, but you wouldn't hate being one, would you? Would you not want to be that kid? But same idea here. Like, if you're an organization and you get a donation from one of these ransomware organizations, do you take it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the really interesting thing about this is really twofold, right? Is the Robin Hood effect where, okay, are these groups really that bad, right? Look what they're doing. They're only targeting large corporations that, depending who they are, may not be paying their quote unquote fair share in taxes or doing all that they could to help with donations and helping other organizations, non-for-profits, right, to help them out. So we're going to rob from the rich and give to the poor. And it's very interesting if you're on the other side of this. It's sort of like if you liken it to a drug cartel, right, where a lot of times what they will do in their communities is they give back to their communities, right? They build schools, they build churches, they build infrastructure, and give that back. And this is kind of a digital version of that, right? We're in a way, I mean, they're not creating drugs, but they're breaking in and essentially holding people's information hostage, but then taking those proceeds. And here, So what do you do if you're a charity, right? Do you, $20,000 to a charity is a sizable donation. Do you just reject that? I mean, how many other donations are you going to need to take and make up for that? And then the other side of it is, depending on how the donation is done, how do you know that it is actually coming from this group? I mean, this is almost like it's a little bit, the other side of it, it's also a little bit strange in that instead of wanting to stay in the dark shadows, this group is kind of stepping out for a second and saying, hey, look what we did. We're not so bad. We give money to people that we take. So, um, you know, don't look poorly at us. We're just trying to help people out. The other side is how much money have they actually made, which is referenced. How much money have they actually made that they're willing just to throw away $20,000, right? Because I don't really care who you are. $20,000 is a lot of money, and to just, and I said throw it away, probably not the right term, but to donate it, right? Just to hand it off is very interesting. Is very interesting.
Greg, what do you think?
Yeah. This one is super interesting to me. I mean, it's very akin to, looking at back in the days of Pablo Escobar, right? A big component of his entire protection scheme was paying out the citizens around him, and they would be lookouts for him. They would provide all these kind of service. And he actually funded, the whole area around him more than the whole government. So I mean, that's a definite extreme case here. Where ransomware actors, I mean, this one, it's interesting that they would choose to do a donation like this. I mean, I wonder if they're looking for some good karma or something like that. Because, conversely, we have the exact opposite, right? We have these other groups, we've just seen the largest attack against healthcare in history, largest ransomware attack observable in that space. And that one and multiple others have actually resulted in people dying from these attacks, from not being able to get help, not locking up these core crucial systems. So I mean, it's definitely like there's two sides of this coin, and we've actually seen kind of infighting within some of these groups where they're the side of like, we're specifically not going to attack hospitals, we're not going to do that type of thing. But then there's the other side where they're like, yeah, we're going to go directly after them because they're definitely going to pay us. So it's interesting, right? It's creating these kind of conflicts within that ecosystem as well. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see them actually trying to do some good with their stolen assets. So definitely an interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, if there was a way to trace it to see like who it was stolen from to make the decision, but at the end of the day, these are livelihoods, and I don't know if it would be okay to take it when you think of it boiling it down. I'm not sure that it would be okay, even if it was from someone that maybe deserved it. You just don't know, and I think at the end of the day, you got to stand on some sort of moral ground to say, we're not going to accept this.
Yeah, and I think that's what some of the charities referenced in this article has said. If we find out that this is them, we're not accepting we're not accepting that donation.
Like, why wouldn't they just put it in if they, and this is where it's kind of interesting. You could just file it as an anonymous donation if you really wanted to, but you want to let it be known that, hey, we're a successful industry and it's coming from us. You're trying to make a statement. It almost makes me even more kind of iffy to take it,
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's one of the people referenced in this article from our friends over at Red Canary, Katie Nichols. She says, this is just really, they're just trying to improve their public image.
Mm-hmm.
It's a PR campaign, which again, it's really funny. This kind of goes full circle back to Greg's original, even Greg's original article. This is these are businesses, right? And they're run like run like businesses, and PR, right? There's no such thing as bad PR. So, let's do whatever we can to help our image.
A spooky recommendation is the Netflix series Money Heist. If you haven't watched it, it's pretty sweet. I think it's translated into English, and I would have almost rather them. I think they were speaking Spanish during it, and I would have rather the subtitles, but it's still good, and it kind of follows that idea of like good guys, bad guys. PR is big, but we're hooked on it. All right. So let's round this thing out. I brought in, I had to do it. They pay me to do this kind of stuff. So VMware's Carbon Black came out with their threat report, the global IR threat report, security tipping point. And, just a couple stats in there. 82% of attacks are now involving counter IR, which I think is really frightening. When you think of counter IR, you think of when an attacker can detect that an organization is onto them and pulling at threads, they almost become, it's a visceral reaction, right? They become destructive. We typically see it through ransomware. They don't even ask for a ransom. They're just there to just, fire full blast. And so, my question, and Greg, I'll go to you with this, is with that in mind, if I'm an organization, I see something that I believe is an incident, it's happening in real time. How does this change how I respond with this in mind?
Right, right. And that's the big thing we've seen in various incident response cases now is that these attackers will try and monitor the communication channels of the security team. They'll try and understand, what about their activities, and that will change, how they're going to migrate through the environment and what they're going to do. A lot of these attacks, I would say majority of them that we've been brought into, there's always going to be redundant channels for the attackers to get back in. So, they have the kind of main entry that's known about, but there's also going to be that back door that they try and leave there just in case they're discovered. And oftentimes there's multiple different ways they'll have to get back in, even if it comes down to just the credentials that have been stolen and getting in through various public access points that way. But the big thing for customers and those that are responding to incidents need to take into account is assume that the attackers have access to your email, have access to your Slack and your chat, your internal corporate communication comms, and set up a out-of-band communication channels for these specific incidents. If you have something that's already established, you have an incident response plan and process ready to go, where people are trained in this and they understand where to go, that will go a long way, because then that's one of the first things that a lot of IR firms will set up when they come on site is that out-of-band communication channel that's completely off network. That is something that will be difficult for the attackers to discover. But that's always my main thing, is make sure, like, whatever you're talking about, that these attackers are not going to be privy to those communications, and assume your whole team is probably compromised, because in a lot of cases they are.
So let's just say I don't have the funds to, do something immediately, bring in an IR firm. When you say out-of-bound communications, what things do you recommend? Like walkie-talkies? I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
but,
walkie-talkies.
But kind of not.
Get the hamburger phone out.
But what do you recommend? Like using a Discord server, but maybe on a separate device, or, how do you set that up if you're trying to do something pretty quickly?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like the big one I always go back to is using Signal. It's basically texting, like alternative for text messages, but you can also share files. You can have video calls through it and things like that. And just make sure you don't pair that with any of your work equipment. Have that just be something that your team has installed on their cell phones and stuff like that. It makes an easy way to have secure communications, and you can also have it automatically delete messages that are sent, files that are shared, things like that. And it's one of the few that I actually trust. Like WhatsApp is another good alternative. Anything that you just have separate from your actual corporate assets will be valuable here.
That's great. No,
Yeah.
that's good to understand. Go ahead, Trent.
No, I was going to say, I mean, everything Greg said, I mean, is spot on. You have to realize that when attackers get in, one of the first areas they're going to compromise is your mail server, and the reason why, and they're not going to do anything to it. They're just going to sit there and watch because they know that that's where all information flows. So you've got to have you have to have those out of band communications, and if a customer, if they send an email out to an IR firm, bad guys are going to see it. So they're going to know who they're dealing with. Just like IR firms, they have their modes and methods of operation and how they go about an incident response. And the attackers likely have researched and understand this as well. So they know how this is going to go. So you have to, to Greg's, I mean, Greg nailed it. I mean, that's really what it is. It's communication is key, and you've got to set up things out of band. I would even say go to Best Buy and have 20 or so phones that you've bought, prepaid cell phones, in a safe, that these are our IR firms. These are our breach, or not firms, phones, right? These are our breach phones. And if something happens, this is how we're going to communicate, and we're going to distribute it out to the group. And this is an alternate method of communication. Again, like Greg said, you have to assume that everybody is compromised, and that even goes all the way down to the cell phones that the folks are carrying, whether they're owned by the organization or not. Ditch them. Don't communicate over them. I am a big Signal user. Love my Signal. I have friends that hate that I use Signal. Because they use regular messaging, but that is, that's also a great way to go about it. But I would even, add that other layer and just say, you know what, go and invest in prepaid phones. That's the only time that you use them, and they stay locked up. And once the incident is done, you take them out, take them to the shooting range, and shoot holes in them and set them on fire and get rid of them. And then start over, go buy another batch and lock them back up in the safe for the next time it happens.
I like the shooting idea. That's a good team building after the incident. Go blow up some phones. I like
exactly.
it.
A nice stress relief for all.
Just make sure everyone has gotten at least 8 hours of sleep before you do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Has recovered physically from the incident. Right. All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming on today. We have a bonus question, and since it is the week of Halloween, best costume, worst costume you've ever worn for Halloween. Trent, I'll start with you.
Oh. Ooh. Worst costume, probably when I dressed up as Brandon Lee from The Crow, because it was the year that I did it was the same year that The Dark Knight was out. And so if you actually look at if you look at Heath Ledger's Joker and The Crow from the face makeup standpoint, they look very similar. So people confuse the costume the whole evening. Best costume, I would say a group of friends, we went as a dozen eggs, and each person was a different egg. I was an egg beater, so I dressed up with like an egg carrot with boxing gloves, and I would say that was the best. I would say that was the best, but that's like a group costume that you would have to do.
That counts. Greg?
Oh man, this is a tough one. Give me all the technical ones all day, but this one's tricky. I'd say my best one is probably just last year when my son dressed up as Godzilla and I dressed up as King Kong. Ooh. Just because it was fun. We got to walk around in these big blow up like costumes and like have little battles and stuff, and so that was fun. And now I can use it to go shopping. Right, I just put a little N95 filter on the intake. I'm good to go. Worst one? I don't know. I have so many bad costumes my whole life. I'd say, I don't know, in college I dressed up as a banana one year. Like that was, I don't know, that was a fun year though.
My best costume was, my mom used to hand make our costumes. So I have 3 other siblings. Luckily, I was third in line, so every costume was worn by the sibling after. So I never got to choose the costumes. So I was either Batman or a pumpkin every year. But it was extremely cold when you go Halloween trick-or-treating in New England. It is extremely cold. So I will say the quality of the fabric was warm. I was never a cold child growing up. I just never got to be any of the things I wanted to be. And my worst costume was a mummy attempt because toilet paper, doesn't really, you get pretty loose by the end of the night. You're not a mummy anymore. So that was definitely my best and my worst. All right, guys, thank you again so much for coming on. Want to give you guys just a little sneak peek into episode 15. You can register now at curtainblack.com. Resources, Ask the Howlers. We are going to be focusing on workload security. So please sign up. We are going to be looking forward to that episode. Otherwise, we will catch you then. Thanks for attending.